Member for Joondalup.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And before I begin, for the benefit of the member Willagee, I am a proud Liberal, and if you have a listen, you will see exactly where my values lie. I have no shame in talking about them this morning. Now, where to begin? Watching the Leader of the Opposition yesterday as he delivered his second reading speech, and I was there for the Leader of the Opposition. I sat through the whole lot. I didn't interject. I listened to what you had to say. But I will say it was a little bit like watching an episode of Dancing with the Stars. He danced around all the aspects of this bill in an awkward-looking tango for one, trying to convincingly explain why the ALP couldn't possibly support this bill. Superficial, no, I've got my notes here, superficial would be the best way to describe his performance, and decidedly squirmish. I also noted that one after another, members opposite came and spoke towards the bill, and they cited unfairness as reasons for not being able to support this bill, a theme that I will come back to later. Now, before we explore the rationale behind some of the objections that the members opposite have in regard to the bill, let me just quote, if I may, from the explanatory memorandum that accompanied it. The Workplace Reform Bill 2013, and I quote, seeks to amend the Industrial Relations Act of 1979, the Public Sector Management Act of 1994, and the Salaries and Allowances Act of 1975 as follows. First, to ensure that decisions made by the Western Australian Industrial Relations Commission and the Salaries and Allowances Tribunal have appropriate regard to the public sector wages policy statement, the state's financial position and fiscal strategy, and in relation to the Industrial Commission, the financial position of the relevant public sector agency. That's number one. Number two, to provide the capacity to implement enhanced and more flexible redeployment arrangements that may ultimately end with the involuntary severance of employees that are surplus to an agency's requirements or whose post, office or position has been abolished and cannot effectively be redeployed. So that is the framework through which we're looking at this bill and the arguments that have been presented to us. Now let me begin with the Industrial Relations Commission. In relation to the Industrial Relations Commission taking appropriate regard to the public sector wages policy and the state's financial position and its fiscal strategies, why on earth would this not be supported? That is just plain common sense. That, members, is business management 101. I've had the opportunity to hold several senior management positions in various companies over the years, and in each one there was a wages policy which guided any negotiations with staff. As a senior manager, I would have departmental managers coming to me seeking guidance as to what leeway they could have in upcoming wage negotiations. I advised them of the company's fiscal position, our budget outlook and our strategic wages policy, and they took that on board. This bill ensures that the IRC benefits from the same kind of guidance. If fiscal or budgetary circumstances were tight in the businesses that are managed, we just simply could not be in a position to perhaps offer as much as what staff were hoping to get. That's just the reality of running a business. To not take due regard to an organisation's fiscal and budgetary position, as well as its strategic wages policy, is foolhardy. It leads to unsustainable wage increases which jeopardise the whole organisation. Therefore, remembering that the key argument that was repeated time and time again, this bill is unfair, it is unfair. Let me put it to you, it is fair for the IRC to receive such guidance. And indeed it would be unfair on the tax-paying public of Western Australia for the IRC not to receive it and not to give regard to it. This bill is actually about fairness. Now, I also want to make comment about some of the thoughts expressed by members opposite in relation to CPI increases to wages. We know that CPI measures relative changes in the price of goods and services covering a broad range of day-to-day things such as food, clothing, alcohol, housing, transportation, communication, recreation, education and so forth. It is a broad basket of our day-to-day living costs. It is therefore fair and equitable to give due regard to increasing wages by the rate of inflation, or CPI, to ensure that the same basket of goods you could purchase on your income last year can continue to be purchased this year. However, members opposite have made it known that they believe that this is not good enough. Wages should rise at a rate greater than inflation, irrespective, therefore progressively improving people's standard of living. Now, while that is a noble concept, it is dangerously flawed. An example was given of an employee in a licensing centre who, after doing the same job for over 20 years, was still only classified as a level 1. But my thoughts regarding this are, without implying anything against that worker in that example, if the job role hasn't changed and the worker is doing the same role for the last 20 years, and assuming the wage for that role has at least kept up with inflation, then what's the problem? I grew up believing that if I wanted to earn more, I needed to get a promotion, or I needed to take on more responsibility. From time to time, this required that I sought out further education. It may have required me to do some voluntary work to gain some more experience. Whatever it was, there was an incentive for me to improve myself and seek advancement. If I could have just stayed in my first entry-level job and be guaranteed that my wage would grow in excess of inflation without any need for more productivity, where would that incentive have been? I would now still be weeding pot plants at a nursery at the back of Wanneroo, and you would all be deprived of my wisdom today. More importantly, where would that have left my employer? Australia needs to be very careful. We have already recently heard from significant companies such as Woodside, Chevron, Shell and others that Australia's workforce is becoming ever less competitive globally. Our quality of workmanship is high, there's no doubt about that. But if unions continue to push for significantly high wage increases, much higher than the rate of inflation, with no gains at all in productivity, it is a game with an unfortunate ending. And that is unfair. Now, to the second major part of this bill, the ability to implement involuntary redundancies. This provision is also absolutely about fairness. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be cute about this issue. It's not nice to be made redundant. I've had it happen to me twice. And I've also had the unfortunate task of making others redundant over the years. Redundancy provisions are not pleasant, but they are an absolutely necessary tool for a modern workforce. Not only is Western Australia the only state which does not have involuntary redundancy provisions in place, but it would be fair to say that the WA public sector employees are the only employees in Australia where involuntary redundancies are not applicable, and that is simply not fair. It's not fair on the tax-paying public of Western Australia who rightly expect the government of the day to be a good steward of their taxes, in particular when it comes to managing our public workforce. The ability of an employer to make staff redundant is key to providing the confidence to grow and expand when demand is strong, and having a lawful mechanism to respond when demand is poor. Without such provisions, there would be no incentive to take risk, grow, and ultimately to employ more people. A lack of such provisions would put an entire workforce at risk in a downturn. The general public of Western Australia get this. It makes perfect sense to them. To have WA's public servants exempt from redundancies whilst the rest of Australia is not, is simply not fair. Unlike what the members opposite would have you believe, this bill in no way belittles the valuable and critical service that our public service provides. I have many friends who are public servants, and their professionalism and dedication to this state is to be admired. That, however, does not change the need for the state to have the capability to respond to changing demand and technological factors appropriately, just like any other employer. The state does not have an axe to grind with a public service, as members opposite are implying. Indeed, our voluntary redundancy program has been broadly accepted as being very generous. But we need a fair, equitable, and appropriately flexible regulatory framework within which to manage our public workforce. The WA public would demand no less. To do anything else would be unfair. Now, having been a tad astounded at the views expressed opposite thus far, I decided to see how the views of members opposite stacked up to the beliefs of the Australian Labor Party. So off I went to the ALP website. Not sure if my Liberal laptop would crash upon entering this foreign territory, I proceeded with trepidation. But what I found seemed to go contrary to the sentiments expressed by members opposite thus far. And in fact, it seemed to support our efforts in passing this bill. And I will share with you some of my findings of your own website for the benefit of members opposite, so that perhaps they may contemplate their position prior to voting on this bill. Upon entering the ALP website, on the very homepage, it says, "We are for a fairer Australia." So are we. And fairness is equality. What we're for, there's a section there called What We're For, and it's entitled Fairness. And it says, Labor is for fairness. Fairness goes to the very core of Labor's being. Fairness goes to the very core of Labor's being. There's another section on the website which says Labor is for workers. And it says, we are working together to build a fair workplace of the future. So let me summarise. This bill is absolutely about fairness. It's fair to have a level playing field. It's fair to take due regard to the fiscal and budgetary position when setting wages. It's fair to have the appropriate human resource management tools available to effectively and fairly manage the state's public workforce. And that is what the WA public expect. As I see it, Labor has two choices. You can either support this bill and by doing so support fairness, or you can vote against it and put on the public record that Labor is economically backward and evidence that it cannot be trusted to run this state fairly, equitably or efficiently. Thank you, Madam Acting
Member for Churchill.